public shaming. With today's technology, it's as prevalent as ever, as most businesses have cameras throughout, and we all have a phone camera with us virtually 24/7. And as more and more of us are gathering our news and sharing our opinions on social media, public shaming can spread like wildfire. Nothing presents a soapbox quite like a photo or video that quickly goes viral, providing everyone an opportunity to weigh in, with or without anonymity. The problem is, much of what is spread and judged upon can simply be someone's weakest moment or an uncharacteristic bad decision, the consequences of which can be permanent. On the flip side, public shaming offers comfort to many as it provides the ability for a society to police itself, regulating what is and is not acceptable behavior. Over the past few months, our city has seen the shaming of a woman illegally recorded performing a public sex act, while her male partners seem to escape judgment altogether. We witnessed the racist rants of Calgary Cat Bears and the widespread identity leak of those Calgarians who hold an account on the adultery-promoting website ashleymadison.com. It begs the question, is there any merit to public shaming? Hey Calgary, I'm Kevin Chorney. Welcome aboard for Season 6 of Calgary Now. We're happy to have you with us. Today we're talking public shaming, as I'm sure you figured out by now, and I'm joined by Sarah Dorchette, Department of Communications, Media and Film from the University of Calgary, also a master's student, correct?
Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for being here. And Georgia Gaydon-Jones,
Correct.
again from the Department of Communications, Media and Film from the U of C. So you guys obviously are old pals then? You're not going to gang up on me here?
We'll try not to.
Okay,
We'll try
fair
not
enough.
to, yes.
Sarah, maybe I'll start with you. Is there ever an instance when public shaming has any merit?
I don't think so. I'm sorry, I'm blinking.
Well, I mean, to me it seems as though crime, a dangerous offender has been released from prison, a pedophile, for example. The public is made aware of these people. Whether or not, they'd been rehabilitated is probably another question. Is that a fair assessment that, look, we need to know, we do need to publicly shame these people?
I don't know. I kind of would agree with what Sarah was saying, that no, I think you have to make a decision about whether it's okay to engage with public shaming or not.
As a whole. And
it's something I struggle with because there's certainly been instances, recent instances in the media where I feel this kind of slight pleasure about whoever is being shamed. I feel that someone's being exposed as a bigot or as a racist or something like that, and I'm not going to lie, that kind of gave me some kind of satisfaction. But I feel like ultimately, if you're going to put your stamp of approval on something like this, then it just opens it up to...
The sky's the limit.
Yeah, exactly. And usually the people who end up getting shamed most often are people who are vulnerable. And most often it's usually women who end up getting publicly shamed. So I feel like I have to kind of make a call and check myself.
Yeah.
I think it depends on, again, I have no idea whether it is ever the right way to go, but I think it's important to take things on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. A politician being shamed for saying or doing something, that I think that person should be held accountable, but when it's an average person, especially if it's, say, social media, where it's kind of, is this public, is this private? I think that's where the questions are going.
Let's back up. How has public shaming evolved over the years? To me, the dunce cap comes to mind first and foremost.
Yeah.
People being tarred and feathered. I mean, what else have we seen as time has progressed?
I think, I'm not a historian, but I think there were cases a long time ago where people were forced to wear a certain color of fabric on their sleeve to show that they were poor in certain parts of the world. Then
I mean, it's not a new phenomenon.
People have been displayed in the town square, to shame them for minor criminal acts and so on. It's not a new thing.
No, not at all. Begs the question, though. I mean, is the root of public shaming, is it for societal change, or is it simply punitive?
I would say maybe punitive, but also when someone's punished, like the shaming is done as a punishment, but it's to show this is wrong. Like if you've stolen, then you're put in the public square, and you are mocked for having more so been caught versus actually stealing. So it's kind of a question of, yeah, whether it's a punishment and whether it's actually working, or if it's just a form of entertainment. Like I've been watching this show that is set in Renaissance Italy, and all of the executions are done more for entertainment.
Sick.
And and rather than punishing someone.
Nowadays, Georgia, do you think people take, well, I guess, you alluded to earlier, there is a certain pleasure that people gather from those that are publicly shamed for the right reasons?
Probably. I think that it's like then and now it's about kind of policing boundaries, and those are boundaries about what's deemed morally acceptable or not. And I think often the issue or what bothers me about public shaming is not like the shaming is something separate, but then there's also the issue that's being policed and those boundaries that are being policed. So whether it's like, double standards when it comes to sexuality or something like that, then we should talk about that and not just focus on the public shaming aspect and what was said, he said, she said on Twitter or on Facebook and so on.
The Ashley Madison fiasco, I think everyone's familiar with it. So thousands of these members, of course, 90% of which turned out to be men, which I think is, of course, and we all knew that was coming, silly. Obviously, the group responsible for leaking their names, credit card information, they had an agenda. Now, they felt that website was immoral. So they made that decision to police society the way that they saw fit and publicly shame these people. Obviously, there's an inherent danger in a group being able to have that moral authority. I mean, how do you police something like that? I mean, does this fall within the realm of let me ask you this. Was it correct that they were shamed? Is this fall within as far as our moral compass, the two of you, I mean, did you have a problem with those people being exposed the way they were?
Yeah, I did,
Yeah.
I think, and it goes back to what Sarah was just saying about that we need to look at things on a case-by-case basis, because there were so many people using that site for so many different reasons, and I don't think that we can make a moral judgment or any kind of judgment about what those people were doing in kind of a blanket way.
Yeah, I agree. I actually thought, oh, this is good, holding people accountable for perhaps not being truthful to partners. But then I heard stories about some people who were using the website to explore their sexuality in a way that the example I'm thinking of was a man who is in Saudi Arabia, who was exploring his homosexuality, and now he could be imprisoned or perhaps even worse in Saudi Arabia. And his life is now in danger because of this leak. And like that is an extreme example.
It's a real consequence,
but I think holding people accountable when you're not part of that relationship, or that you're not in that in the relationship, I think you're overstepping your bounds. I
think it's fair to say that people, they want their privacy upheld to the highest degree, but they really have no issue intruding on the privacy of others.
It's probably true in a lot of cases. I
think it's disappointing, and I would probably agree. I think it is pretty true. I think it just seems that we want to publicize punishment as much as we can. And I struggle to figure out why that was. But, I think back to my own life, and probably the lives of many kids. In school, if you're acting up in the classroom, it's your name on the chalkboard, Another offense is a check mark, very public. One more offense and you're sent down to the principal's office and you're sitting outside of his office. Again, for all students to see, teachers to see, for judgment to be placed. I mean, do we need to shift from, early on to get away from this public need to really observe punishment?
That's a really good question. And I think there's a big difference between having a child sit outside the principal's office in a school, because that's a fairly, contained environment, right? guess one of the shifts that's happened in recent years is that we've moved on online, and so that space becomes less manageable and less contained.
Anonymity and all the rest of it. I do want to touch on that a little bit further. We're going to quickly check in with the rant pack, though, folks. Stay with us.
There is definitely a place for public shaming. There is definitely a place for that, with some caveats. If you are a private citizen, you should not be publicly shamed, except if you are a pedophile chasing after 13-year-old girls. There's every reason to public shame somebody like that. Whereas if you are a public figure who builds their reputation on holding other people to account and establishing certain criteria for instance, if you're a church leader or if you're a political leader, and you have a standard of behavior for all these people who you lead, and then you fall down and you're behind the scenes, you're a total hypocrite, that should be brought to attention. There's no reason that a public person should be shamed when they are falling down and living a double life and doing exactly what they say that they don't want other people to do. So yeah, give her.
So Julie was obviously a pretty big fan of the ability to public shame. Clearly she's not alone. Church leaders, business leaders, are they fair game? Hypocrisy stirs people pretty quickly.
Yeah, I have to kind of go back to my original answer of I do think it depends on whether they're choosing to live a public life. So a leader in any kind of sort should be held accountable. They've chosen to work with that kind of leadership role. Yeah. They should be held to a higher set of standards.
I think it's also pretty easy for people to observe what someone's doing and lash out because, like you mentioned earlier, the internet is there for everyone's misgivings. The anonymity is paramount. I mean, you could really do a lot of damage from behind a computer screen without having to own up to it. I suppose. I mean, I don't know if the anonymity per se is maybe hampering the message, though. It's like the guy at the end of the back of the room shouting. I mean, do people still listen? I mean, I guess the question is the anonymity of the internet losing its credibility? Those who post without owning up to who they are.
I don't know if the anonymity is even still there, because if you really need to search, you can find these people. And this kind of leads back again into public shaming. I've seen a lot of activity online where they will take someone who is attempting to harass outspoken women on Twitter, and these people will find this harasser and post all of their information, where they work, where they go to school, possibly where they live, their phone number. And this kind of practice, it's called doxing. That's, I see where they're coming from with trying to hold this person accountable for sending death and assault threats to people online, but it's like, how far do we want to go to have these standards?
Doxing.
Yes.
So it's an illegal, it's an illegal offense, is it, doxing?
I believe it is a questionable act.
Interesting.
It's just extremely hard to police.
Is that sort of half the problem, Georgia? The fact that it really is hard to police?
I think it is really hard to police what goes online. I think, the law is catching up all the time to what's going on online. Yes, for sure. But I think what Sarah is saying is true. I think that idea of being anonymous on the internet is, we're losing that, definitely. There are more and more sites where you used to be able to just comment anonymously, but now you have to register using your Facebook, and so people are being held accountable themselves for the things that they say when they're holding other people accountable. So these instances that you're talking about are almost like shamers being shamed themselves. And I just wonder what the difference is between holding someone accountable and shaming them. I feel like there is a difference.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint, what that difference is. I think, personally, obviously what you've described, doxing, that's far beyond, the realm of holding somebody accountable for anything. I mean, if you don't agree with somebody's statement or what they're promoting, there should be a limit. There should be discourse. I guess that's where it's a little disappointing as well. We sort of lost that ability to sit down and discuss. Why is that, do you think?
I think that at the same time we've gotten caught up in a culture of shaming. We're also become somewhat allergic to having a proper discussion and receiving criticism, like constructive criticism. So oftentimes you'll see someone criticizing someone else on a forum or something like that online, and then there's a reaction of, oh, haters, you know, and people run away from it and don't engage and have a proper conversation and just won't accept any criticism at all and moderate the comments on their blogs, take out all negative content. Yeah. And that's, I think it's part of the same problem in a strange kind of way.
I see where you're coming from. I think part of it is with commenting online, having a discussion online, it's very instantaneous. You know, you can post something and 5 minutes later you have like 20 comments.
Twitter
already.
Is, it spreads like wildfire like that.
Yeah, things can just explode, go viral. Even if it doesn't go viral, you can still get a lot of activity. And so when you are reading things that perhaps the intent was constructive criticism, you can take it just very really to heart because you're just reading things so quickly. On the other hand, when someone offers criticism, it might not even be actual constructive criticism. It might just be, I didn't like this opening to your video. And then people just somehow devolve rather than having an actual discussion.
Are people getting a little sensitive online, maybe, in that regard?
I think it's a heightened sensitivity. I don't think people are being too sensitive.
Okay.
I think it's just because things can react so quickly.
Like you say, no time to think. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We're going to jump to another break and check in with the Rand Pat folks. Stay with us.
As far as public shaming is concerned, I think there's a few issues involved. I think first and foremost, as a society, we're going to have to change. We can't be so hard on the political people who run for elections and then something that happened 6 years ago comes out and everybody freaks out at them. I think we have to realize that nobody has privacy. We can all be shamed, and if somebody's out there getting embarrassed, there should be some level of understanding that they're a human being. They might have misspoken or spoken in another context, and now it's coming out, and it's usually an attack, and usually it's pretty cheap, usually doesn't lead to any kind of social change. It's just people talking smack about one particular individual. But that's fun and good until it happens to you. They can find out what's on your Twitter and your Facebook just like they can the politicians. So I think as a society, we're gonna have to be more forgiving and know that our leaders have some dirt on them.
Now, during Stampede, there was a very public sex act that involved a female and two males. And subsequently, the female was outed, where it seemed, there was zero public scrutiny towards the men whatsoever. I mean, is this sexism at its purest?
I would hesitate to call it sexism at its purest, but I definitely think it's an example. White women's sexuality is often suppressed, and when it does happen or is shown, it is very sensationalized. So that's probably why public shaming seemed to focus on her versus the men, because she was probably stepping past that idea of morality that seems to be kind of in people's minds.
But I mean, these two guys in broad daylight involved just as much as she is. I mean, obviously their morality is down the tubes as well at that time, no?
I don't know. I don't make a moral judgment on any of them. You're not supposed to engage in that kind of thing in public. In public,
during the day. Don't get me wrong. Hey, the act itself, whatever floats your boat. Don't get me wrong.
They're consenting adults, and the thing that they didn't consent to was having someone film them and share that film online.
Yeah.
Right. So is that the bigger issue then? The illegality of the video itself, or are people in the right to be focused on the act?
I think the act is nobody's business.
The act is nobody's. So we're more concerned with the illegality of the video. And to be clear, it was an illegal act to videotape people unwittingly, and then of course to publish it online like that.
Yes.
Now, oddly enough, we know the name of this woman. We do not know who shot the video somehow, nor, as far as I could tell, have there been any charges laid against her. I think it speaks volumes. I think what you're saying is true. I mean, we're focusing so much on what's perceived as immoral, and yet the illegal act is left unpunished. I mean, what does that say about us as a society?
I think it kind of leads to this idea of rape culture. So the idea of rape culture is that that the act of sexual assault is not punished. And obviously this was consenting adults,
Yeah.
but the video, like Georgia said, was still spread without these folks' consent.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just a lesser form of rape culture.
So, to be fair, once the video was released and the woman's name was released and was made very public and it spread like wildfire, like you say, over Twitter and Facebook, she took an approach that I think surprised a lot of people. She owned up to the act, to her involvement in the act. Are these the acts of strong, proud women, or is this something else?
I don't know.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't really want to make a judgment about her. I
That's
think
fair.
that she probably thought about what had happened and saw what had happened to other people maybe who had had a similar experience and considered her options, and that was the option that she went with. And, you know, I don't know if she, I suspect it's a no-win situation for her. I don't know if whatever she would have done would have received a positive
What do you think? So
reaction.
do you commend her actions for owning up to the way she did?
I think she made the best decision that she could have for herself, because I don't know what her situation is. I don't know what other options were in front of her. I think that getting out in front of it, taking control over something that happened that was completely out of her control is a really good thing, and I think she did a good job.
Is there an imbalance gender-wise as to who is shamed and who is not shamed? Not just on social media, but mainstream media as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the examples, I guess, that we could cite easily?
Well, even just the example of the sex act. She is seen as going past those boundaries, whereas the idea of men will be men, boys will be boys, is still out there, no matter how wrong that idea is. On the flip side, I don't know with public figures if gender plays as much of a role. I do think it does play a role, but I don't know about saying across the board. I think for maybe celebrities, women definitely, but I'm trying to think of politicians. Though the reason I'm having trouble thinking of female politicians is there's not a lot of them.
Well, I would say that Alison Redford took her fair share of abuse, you know, if not,
That's
I guess
true.
you could call that, you know, public shaming. She made some pretty terrible decisions. That may not be the best example, but it's clear that you feel that it's, you know, in the mainstream media there is a bit of a gender equality. Also, there was this summer, it's been a busy summer in Calgary, a couple of racist, full-on bigoted cab fares were recorded, just berating. It was disgusting, frankly. Cab drivers with their racist rants. Now, it was published online, obviously, and also it was published by local media, which I think was a good thing. It begs the question, though. People that are watching that video, is this an example? Okay, well, if these are my beliefs, I better make sure I'm not doing that in a cab, or is it actually combating racism? I guess what I'm asking is, are we going to see social change from showing the faces of racist bigots doing their thing on television, or is that simply punitive?
If it starts a conversation about racism, then that's a positive outcome. However, and I think that those individuals were verbally assaulting their taxi drivers.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Which is very, very different to the example that we were talking about just now.
Indeed.
You know, which
Indeed.
is something that went on between consenting adults.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
This is a kind of a completely different case, and it goes back to what you were saying about talking about things on a case-by-case basis. I still don't know if I can get behind the shaming aspect, but holding people accountable for that kind of behavior and that kind of assault, yes. I think that that's important.
And I think people take a bit of solace, I guess. They comfort in the idea that, yes, okay, sure, these people will be charged, and because they were illegal activities they were involved in. There was assault, one of the cameras were removed, property damage, whatnot. But maybe the punishment won't be as heavy as I think a lot of people would have liked to have seen. Cue the video, and now society is, in its essence, policing itself by shaming these people. Now, I'm not asking for your judgment, but am I on the right path with that?
I think that, yeah, these kinds of shaming or policing of explicit racist behavior is a good thing and would lead to a less explicit racist society. But you're still going to have those ideas in people's heads, unfortunately. They might not be showing that behavior in such explicit ways of throwing these slurs around, berating these poor workers. But those ideas will still be around. There'll still be systemic racism. But at least, like Georgia said, there will be a conversation started. I remember back when the articles were coming out about the 2013 incident, that was right around when...
This was the gentleman from Airdrie. I use a term very loosely, the idiot from Airdrie. Yeah. In the cap. So that article came out right around when the city of Calgary was looking at making a Bill of Rights or something along those lines for taxi drivers. So leading to something that will give protection to these workers when, what can they do when it's a cab fare? That's how they make their money. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
I want to jump into a quick little game. I know it's been a bit of a serious discussion, I'm glad, but let's end things on a bit of a lighter note. So what I've got here is some instances of public shaming in the past, which may or may not be true. I want you to tell me what you think, what your gut says. Is this a true instance of public shaming or not? First up, if you were late for church back in the day or fell asleep during a sermon, you were forced to wear a giant rosary. I'll throw that one to you, Georgia. True or false? What do you think? Oh, come on.
I'm going to say false.
I think false.
You'd be surprised. That is true. Can you believe it? Yeah. All right, another one quickly. Farmers who sold rotten produce had to sell their crops naked for the rest of the week. This would have been around the 1600s, apparently.
That has to be false.
I think false.
Yeah, you nailed that one. You nailed that one. Okay, we'll get to maybe one more here. Now, if you were caught gambling too many times back in the day, a chain covered in giant wooden dice and cards was placed around your neck.
True.
Interesting.
I'm going to say false.
True.
Yes.
Can you believe it? All right, one more. Okay, so if caught drinking in public, booze was taped to the hands of the drunkards, and the offender had to go by the name Edward 40 Hands for the rest of the night.
That's false.
False.
Come on, that depends who you're talking to. I'm sure I've seen that happen before. Ladies, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Folks, that's all the time we have for our discussion this evening. As always, we're available on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Don't be a stranger. Reach out. Let us know what makes you tick and you'd like to see us talk about on the show. Take care.